We'll try. These are the saddest words a programmer has ever spoken. And most of us have spoken them more than once. These words are often the prelude to months of grueling effort against a deadline we know in our heart we can't make. At the end, we come up tired, burnt, beaten, and short. Management hates us. We hate ourselves. Our families don't know us anymore. The software, if it works at all, is nothing to be proud of. Oh, there have been exceptions. Successful projects have been launched this way, and there's a certain pride in having gone through hell and survived. We have to believe it was worth it, because the alternative is to believe we wasted a big chunk of our lives. There has to be a better way. Here's one that couldn't possibly happen. Well, in the last few years, I've read a lot about this thing called post-Agile. How many of you have heard about post-Agile? A bunch of you are probably thinking, I just came here to get Agile, and now he's already talking about what's after Agile. Well, I'm not. We don't mean post-Agile, we mean post-Agile. Right? We're not talking about the death of the ideas, we're talking about the death of the brand. They're concerned about the direction in which Agile software development has started to go, and it's been going this way for a few years. Let us call Agile dead only as the dramatic impetus to intelligently investigate those issues with a mind towards exploration. The post-Agile that everyone's looking for is this. Where's Agile going now that we're well past the extreme decade?
I'm home. All the time. You finally really did it. You maniac! You blew it up! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
It's been there all along. Let's not blow it up together.
Well, a while ago, Kent Beck invited a few of us to a workshop where we tried to answer one very important question about extreme programming and agile software development. And it was this question. We knew so much about how to build software well. In fact, we knew the secret to building software well in a way that would help customers earn value earlier, get more cash in their pocket sooner. We had all the answers, but they still had all the money, and we couldn't figure this out. What kind of depresses me is that this workshop was 11 years ago, and not much has changed. Now, I want to make it clear that there's nothing I am about to say that has any objective reality or basis in fact. There are no scientific studies. This is all my opinion. So anything that you agree with is great, and anything that you disagree with is not my fault. It's just my opinion. Everyone has one. I think one of the big problems that we face, and have faced now for over a decade, is that we think of agile software development as a mindset, and that this idea turns a lot of people off. We end up with articles like this. I don't know about you, but when I hear phrases like this, it drives me nuts, right? You don't do agile, you have to be agile. And this is one of those statements that, I forget the author where I first read this, but it's a beautiful little three-word phrase, true but useless. It's true that we actually do treat agile software development as a different philosophy, as an approach. For some of us, it's even a way of living. That's something that we should talk about over the coffee break. But instead of getting people adopting the mindset and really valuing what we say that we value, we get a lot of this. We still get people who want to know the rules. What do I do? How do I do it? Leave me alone. Don't change the way I think. And I think it's been like this now for 15 years, and somehow we're not getting the message. We say really cool sounding things that make us sound really smart, that make us sound enlightened, that make us sound like, you know, like monks. But the rest of the world doesn't get what we're saying. One of my favorites is the one that I learned, I first saw it from Bill Caputo. You saw a reference to it in the clip from one of my previous keynotes. And you know that you've hit the big time when Ron Jeffries makes you one of his signatures. That's a huge deal. If Ron Jeffries ever puts anything that you say in his signature, that means he really likes you. And I think it's true. I genuinely believe it's true that extreme programming isn't this thing out there, it's in here. The problem is that when we say this, people look at us funny. I find it wonderful that this article has made it around Twitter once again in the last couple of months. And this is a classic story, and I know it's an American metaphor. Even as a Canadian, I understand it. But maybe the rest of the world has a little trouble with it. The idea that, so we can use football as an analogy, right? Or basketball, I suppose. If we're here, that's true. Basketball is a much better choice. When does it stop being basketball? Does it stop, you know, if we, so imagine we tried basketball and it didn't work. Well, we didn't really have a ball that could bounce. Right? We tried using some socks. It didn't bounce very well, which was kind of trouble. And we couldn't find any baskets. So we just drew a square on the wall where the basket should be. But the problem is we couldn't tell really whether the socks would go in the basket or not. We made all these changes, and it turns out basketball is too hard to play, so we don't play it. And an article like this makes it sound like the people who are trying their best just don't get it. And maybe that's true. But here's the point. I'm sure there are a lot of people who grew up in poor neighborhoods, in poor parts of the world, who did play some kind of basketball with socks and a square, probably written in chalk, on a brick wall on the side of a building. Are you really going to tell them that they're not playing basketball? There are poor kids in South America who play a game with a broom handle and a bottle cap. And they flick the bottle cap and try to hit it with the stick. Pardon me. They try to hit it with a stick. It's called petilla. They play it a lot in the Dominican Republic. Those kids grew up to be some of the best baseball players in the world. You're not going to tell me that they're not playing baseball. And you're certainly not going to tell them that they're not playing baseball. So although it's true that at some point it stops being what we think it is, I'm not sure that that's an excuse to tell people that they're doing it wrong. And these around the ear microphones don't always work with my hair. There we go. My fault. Now we make it even worse because the same guy who wrote this article also wrote the origin of this article. It came from the same project, the same team. Here are all these rules that you should follow, but please remember, they're just rules. So we confuse the matter even more. We tell people, here are some simple rules to help you get started, to help you learn how to improve the way you build software, but don't pay too much attention to the rules. Follow the rules, but don't worry about the rules. This is awfully confusing to me. Even in 2006, we were still talking about the difference between the principles and the practices and the values. And then you would have some people who would say, follow the practices, and other people who would say, no, 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 the practices are a bad idea, you need the principles. And then a bunch of other people who would say, no, 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 the principles are a bad idea, just live the values. But again, I can tell you, be agile, but you don't know what that means. And when we say, just live the values, all right, if you want to make the way you build software better, all you have to do is cancel all the culture and learning that you've done since you were a baby and have a completely different worldview. Easy. So where does this leave us? Here. At the end of all of this, we still have a bunch of people who look at us like we're crazy, like we're a bunch of hippie surfer dudes or whatever the 2014 equivalent is. Right? We're the 2014 equivalent of like the people hitchhiking across North America on the backs of motorcycles just saying, you know, party on, man, it's all going to be good. Well, it turns out that we weren't crazy. Maybe we just did a poor job of communicating what we intended. When I read this book, this chapter hit me in the face real hard, and it starts to give us a little bit of credibility for what we tried to do. With extreme programming, we tried to give the world a handful of simple practices that we think, if you try them and follow them and practice them, you will reverse engineer the principles and from there reverse engineer the values that we think will help you really change the way you work, and for the better. And now I have a nice shiny book behind me that I can say, hey, there's an author who knows nothing about software development who thinks this is a good idea. They call it scripting the critical moves. It's not enough just to say, go there, do this, be agile. But you need to show people how to get started. The critical moves are the first few steps. They don't take you all the way, but they help you get going. And the idea, of course, is that once people take the first few steps, then they start to ask some questions, and they become part of the community, and now we have them. Now they're one of us. One of us. This is not a new idea. We already thought of this. We were talking about this, I know this article says 2008, but we were talking about this in 1999. So if there are any musicians in the room, especially if there are piano players in the room, then you already know what an etude is. An etude is a piece of music that acts like an exercise. Finger exercises are boring. Wow, are they boring. I hated them. But I loved the Chopin etudes because they were like finger exercises but sounded like music. And we now, and even then, talked about the extreme programming practices as etudes. They weren't rules to follow. They were practices to practice and learn from. And that doesn't mean that we have to do test-driven development all the time. And it doesn't mean that we have to do iteration planning every 2 weeks. What it means is that we practice these things. We become good at them. We begin to master them. And then when we need to deal with a problem in our work, we already know how to deal with it. We know what to do. They say that under pressure, you go back to your training. This is our training. When it's 4 o'clock in the morning and the customer is yelling and it's costing €2,000 an hour, you want to test drive the fix for that problem so that you know that it's fixed when you're finished. That doesn't mean that we have to test drive every single line of code. And there are some of you in the audience who know me are saying, wow, is he really saying you don't have to test drive every line of code? Yes, that's what I'm saying. But you need to feel comfortable being able at any moment to test drive any line of code. That's the difference between following the rules and practicing the etudes. So now we come back to our important question. Why aren't we rich yet? Because we'd like to be rich, wouldn't we? I'm not saying we need to be rich, but it would be nice. One of the problems that we have is that not all of us are rich, and some of us are becoming rich. And before I put this next slide on the screen, I want to make this very clear. I am not criticizing the success of anyone's name on this next slide. But I'm pointing out that the richness, the success, has been a bit uneven. And it's not these people's fault. It's our fault for treating their ideas like fashion accessories that we buy when we feel like it. There are a lot of companies out there, quite big ones, that follow some of the teachings of these people, not because they think it's going to help the way they build software, but because their friends are doing it. Because their buddy on the golf course said, we started doing this lean Kanban thing, you should do it too, it's great. And it's just the same as buying the same car as your neighbor, buying the same house, or buying a house in the same neighborhood, or buying the same laptop. It's treating the ideas like fashion accessories. These people deserve better than for us out there to treat their ideas like so many cards to collect and share with friends. I tried to figure out which bags would go with which people, and I knew that Uncle Bob's needed to be the most rectangular. Diana's probably had to be the nicest looking. And David Anderson's had to be the biggest. I'm not sure if I got that right. We know for sure that David Anderson's is the most expensive. So we've scripted the critical moves, but I think we failed to convey the vision. I think we've done a good job of teaching people what the practices are. And now you see that in job ads, they expect you to do test-driven development. Not all of them. That would be better. They expect you to do continuous deployment or continuous integration, at least. Or they expect you to have knowledge of at least one Agile discipline, probably Scrum. But I think the problem is that although we have now some of our practices have become part of the mainstream, there are some people out there who don't even call it test-driven development anymore. They just call it programming. So it's happening. But as they say, the future is distributed unevenly. Well, I think the big thing is that although some people are we're finding that some of these practices have become commonplace, the results aren't really getting much better. And I think part of the problem is that the people, the enterprises, the big companies especially, they don't really have any particular reason to change. It goes back to the original problem that I stated at the very beginning. We know how to do it right, but they still have all the money. Well, if they have all the money, then why should they listen to us? They're doing just fine. It's easy to teach people new ideas when they're in trouble. If you can just show them that you're going to solve their biggest problem and then you solve it, they will love you forever. But when they have lots of cash in the bank, they have no reason to listen to you. This dude, who is actually one of the inventors of RSpec, his name is Stephen Baker. He's one of those guys that everybody in our community has heard of, but not enough people outside our community have heard of. Moved down the street from me 2 years ago. And he sat on a chair in my TV room, and we were talking about how our professional lives were going, how our careers were going, and he was on a project, and he was talking about the same kinds of problems. The people around me don't get it. We have these hotshot 22-year-old programmers who think they never make a mistake. We have businesses who keep asking us for solutions instead of telling us what their business goals are and letting us figure out together how we can solve them. And all the cool tricks that I know how to do, nobody lets me do. They all get in my way. And we've been having the same conversation, not just us, but within the community we've been having the same conversation now for 15 years. I'm getting tired of it. Now I have found a few tools along the way that have helped me. This is a particularly good one. So this book is called The New Strategic Selling, and this is a sales book for programmers. Not in the way that you think. Not in the way that it teaches programmers how to do sales, but it includes a model that I use to debug failed sales. It's fantastic. Here is why your customer didn't buy. You need to worry about these things, these things, these things, these things. And it's fantastic. It's a great way to look at a sale that went wrong and figure out what part of it really went wrong. And by the way, if you work for a company, you're still in sales. The difference is who your customers are and what you're selling. What you're selling to your coworkers is a different way of working. What you're selling to your managers is get me the resources to do the job that I need. Give me the right amount of time. Give me the right equipment. Get off my back. Let me do it. Stop asking me every 15 minutes if it's done. Let's talk later. You're a salesperson whether you want to be a salesperson or not. This is one of those things that business people tell you that you probably think is nonsense. I'm afraid it's true. Now, by the way, when you work for a company, you're outsourcing your marketing to the company, but you still have to do sales. That's the difference. So this has helped me really figure out some things about why people aren't buying what I'm selling. And one of the key points in this book that was really helpful to me was the concept of the personal win. People do not change the way they live because of a good idea or a strong argument. unless you can make it for them a personal win. Here was my first personal win related to Agile software development. So I was a programmer at IBM way back in the ancient days, 1997, 1998. I had a problem. I would write code, and then at the end of the day, I would say, great, done, go home, relax, everything's great. Honey, I'm home, my day went wonderfully. Well, what's for dinner? Well, of course, I was cooking, so I knew the answer. The next day, I'd walk back into work, and there would be 5 bug reports waiting for me. So, of course, I would go to the tester. I would try to argue why these aren't really bugs. And she would say, no, they're really bugs. And I would finally agree, and then I would go back and I'd fix them. And in the process of fixing those bugs, I'd probably create 1 or 2 more problems, and then get some coffee, and then it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Now it's time to really try to get something done. Now I go home at 6 o'clock. Honey, I'm home. Let's order pizza. I had a long day. Go back the next day, 3 new bug reports. Every day I thought I was done, and the next day, more bug reports. And I said, this isn't working. I'm doing something wrong, and I don't know what it is. So I made a guess. I just said, well, I guess when I write code, I'm not writing it properly. The testers seem to be finding these problems. What if I did my own testing? What would happen? Maybe I could find some of the problems before the tester does. At least then it's less of a problem. So I went over to my favorite search engine, which of course was Alta Vista back then, how to test Java code. And that's how I learned about JUnit and then extreme programming, and that's how I got here. But what started to happen to me right away was as I applied the ideas I'd learned, I noticed that I found 80% of my problems before the code even left my hands. The only kinds of problems that testers found were the more difficult problems, but the kinds of ones where they just kind of go, you know, I would find those problems before anybody else would see them. So first of all, it was good for me because I saw fewer bug reports. Second, it was good for me because then people didn't see how crappy a programmer I was. So it was very helpful. Most importantly, though, that pain in my chest that I had every day because I didn't really feel like I had finished something, that I was hiding from work overnight and then going back the next day to face bad news, that pain started to go away. That was my personal win. That's why I started practicing test-first programming and eventually test-driven development. If you want to change the way you work and you look at these ideas and think, you haven't found that personal win yet. You haven't found what is it in here that's really going to change your life for the better. I didn't care about making my design better. I didn't care about reducing my defect rate so that I would be a more efficient programmer. I wanted the pain in my chest to go away. That was my personal win. I felt better about the way I worked. Unfortunately, a lot of companies, in spite of this, seem to just want to keep buying 73 kilos of Agile. Just pile on the Agile. Keep putting it on my plate. I don't care what the results are. It's fine. As long as my friends see that we're doing Agile, we're good. Make sure to put some Kanban on the side, because that's the cool stuff, right? That's the stuff that everybody's doing these days. I hear Kanban's really good for colon health. Why don't you give me more Kanban? So while we believe this, and I believe it, what we get instead is this. And I'll bet you that if we run these searches again, yeah, I don't know how easily you can see that. Agile process template, 6.7 million results. Scrum rules, excluding rugby, 1.32 million results. Even extreme programming process template, 4.52 million results. And I'll bet you if we run these searches again today, the numbers will only be higher. Training companies have figured this out. Now there are some training companies that do a good job training in Agile processes, Agile ideas, Agile methods, Agile values. They can teach you to be Agile. I've worked with a bunch of them. In fact, I travel around Europe working with them. Some of them are in this room. Unfortunately, there are some training companies, like this one, who have read one book, who take the contents of that book, copy them into slides, and sell you training at a reduced price. And what they're doing is reading the book to you, because apparently you can't read the book for yourself. This book should have been written in 1976. It was written in 2012. We should not need this book anymore. In fact, I know Tom and Tim a little bit. I've met Tim a few times. Tom and Tim have written some excellent books over the years. They shouldn't have to write this one. It's a bit like The Psychology of Computer Programming. If you read The Psychology of Computer Programming, the book was written in 1972. If you change the code samples to Java, the book stays the same. I find that a little bit depressing. Of course, you know you hit the big time when you end up in comic strips. We all know about Dilbert. If you don't know about Not Invented Here, I strongly recommend you go to notinventedhere.com and start reading. It's hilarious. So, what happened? How in the world did we go from having these really great ideas to a whole bunch of people completely missing the point? To a bunch of people wanting to buy rules that don't actually improve anything about how they run their business or about how they work, that don't become personal wins, that don't help people feel better and go home. Well, a bunch of us have adopted this attitude, and I'm not sure it's helping. Right? There are a bunch of people out there who just say, screw it. When they're ready to learn, the teacher will appear. Of course, they're saying that they're the teacher, right? They're idiots, they don't get it, flip the bozo bit, turn your back, move on. I've done this. Please don't read too many of the messages on the mailing lists related to Agile from like 12 years ago, because I did a lot of this, and I'm not proud of it. I think I'm a little better at this now. We do have the effect that's known as Grandma's ham. Instead of telling you the whole story, I'll give you the punchline real quick. Mom, why do you cut the ends off the ham before you put it in the oven? 10 minutes later. Great-grandma tells the story of why, because of course Mom doesn't know, so she says, ask Grandma. Grandma doesn't know, ask Great-grandma. Great-grandma says, well, dear, our first apartment was very small, you know. In those days, the apartments were very small, and the ovens were very small, and the roasting pans that fit in the ovens were very small. But the hams were really big. So I had to cut off the ends of the ham so it would fit in the oven. And 100 years later, her granddaughter is teaching her great-granddaughter to cut off the ends of the ham, even though the oven is twice the size now. So we have a lot of this going on. Just people continue to do things because they have always done them. This inertia is something that we have to battle against. And giving people rules just creates a different kind of inertia. If they really don't change the way they think, then they won't change the way they act. Now I think is a good time for intermission.
Should I lay down?
Oh, no, don't do that. Just have to. And let me tell you a bit about our billing. I charge $5 for the first 5 minutes, and then absolutely nothing after that.
That sounds great. Too good to be true, as a matter of fact.
Well, I can almost guarantee you that our session won't last the full 5 minutes. Now, we don't do any insurance billing, so you would either have to pay in cash or by check.
Wow, okay.
And I don't make change.
All right.
Go.
Go.
Well, tell me about the problem that you wish to address.
Oh, okay. Well, I have this fear of being buried alive in a box. I start thinking about being buried alive and I begin to panic.
Has anyone ever tried to bury you alive in a box?
No, but truly thinking about it does make my life horrible. I mean, I can't go through tunnels or be in an elevator or in a house, anything boxy.
So what you're saying is you're claustrophobic.
Yes, yes, that's it.
All right, well, let's go, Catherine. I'm going to say 2 words to you right now. I want you to listen to them very, very carefully. Then I want you to take them out of the office with you and incorporate them into your life.
Shall I write them down?
Well, if it makes you comfortable, it's just 2 words. We find most people can remember.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay, you're there.
Stop it! Stop it?
Yes. S-T-O-P, new word.
So, what are you saying?
You know, it's funny. I say 2 simple words, and I cannot tell you the amount of people who say exactly the same thing. I mean, this is not Yiddish, Catherine. This is stop it.
So, I should just stop it.
There you go. You don't want to go through life being scared of being buried alive in a box. It's frightening. Then stop it.
I can't. I mean, it's been with me
No,
since
no,
childhood.
no, we don't go there. Just stop.
So I should just stop being afraid of being buried alive in a box.
You got it. Well, it's only been 3 minutes, so that will be $3.
Actually, I only have a 5, so
I don't make change.
I guess I'll take the full 5 minutes.
What other problems would you like to address?
I'm bulimic. I stick my fingers down my throat.
Stop it! Some kind? Don't do that.
I'm compelled to. My mom used to call me fat.
No. We don't go there. We don't go there either.
But my horoscope did say.
We definitely don't go there. Just stop it. What else?
I have self-destructive relationships with men.
Stop it! You want to be with a man, don't you?
Yes.
Well, then stop it. Don't be such a big baby.
I wash my hands a lot.
That's all right. I wash my hands all the time. A lot of germs. Yeah, don't worry about that.
I'm afraid to drive.
Well, stop it! How are you gonna get around? Get in the car and drive, you kook! Stop it!
Stop it! You stop it!
What's the problem, Catherine?
I don't like this. I don't like this therapy at all. You're just telling me to stop it.
And you don't like it?
No, I don't.
So you think we're moving too fast, is that it?
Yes. Yes, I do.
All right, then let me give you 10 words that I think will clear everything up for you. You want to get a pad and a pencil for this one?
Right.
Are you ready? All right, here are the 10 words. Stop it or I'll bury you alive in a
I don't think we can use this in our professional work. It has no relationship to anything I've said so far. It has no relationship to anything that I will say in the next 20 minutes, but I thought it was funny. This is now the official orientation video for jbrains.ca consulting. So congratulations, you are now all certified jbrains.ca consultants. That's very good. So you should all be billing 40 hours of work next week and send me the money. Okay. Let's take a look now at what we do and see if we find some clues in there about why it's not working. Why are we not getting the results everywhere that we think we should get? Here's one of our good ones, the stand-up meeting. You can call it daily scrum all you want. Because I'm older, I'm going to call it the stand-up meeting. That's what we called it in the old days. Here's a good, perfect, solid example of a stand-up meeting. Everybody's standing in a circle. They're standing near the project board. It all looks very good to us. Unfortunately, daily scrum or stand-up meeting doesn't always seem to do what we would expect. We have some people who like the travelogue approach. You know, I spent some time in this part of the code base yesterday morning. And then in the afternoon, I spent a little time in this part of the code base. And then we had this wonderful cappuccino at break. And then I spent the rest of the day over in this part of the code base. And today I think I'm going to spend some time in that part of the code base. And I really don't care. I don't care. I'm not here to read your travel blog. I want to know, what did you do? What do you plan to do today? And what's bugging you? What's making it hard for you to make progress? Some people like to use it, the daily stand-up, as an opportunity to make sure that their boss sees that they're in early, especially for the ones who do their stand-up meeting at the beginning of the day. Very important to make sure that the boss walks by so that they know that you're standing there waiting for everybody else. And I don't know why we haven't started the stand-up meeting yet. There's the one person who says that they're 91% done for the 4th consecutive day. There's a clue in there somewhere. I'll get to that in a moment. Sometimes we just treat the daily stand-up like this. And if you haven't actually seen this film version of 1984, then I highly recommend it, the John Hurt version. You know, let's just call it the 2-minute hate. Everyone can complain, and we'll go from there. So what's missing? What's missing in our stand-up meetings that make them not really useful? I think it's this. I think the number one thing that we forget to do in stand-up meetings is talk about risks. You know, you might know the Seinfeld story arc where they're talking about risk management in the big textbook, and George has to learn about risk management. Here's risk management in a sentence. Figure out what might go wrong, how much it might cost, the likelihood that it'll happen, and make sure you have at least that much money in the bank. Okay, we're done. The important thing for risks, the important thing for the stand-up meeting is to talk about risks. What might be going wrong? One specific kind of risk, of course, is why has Mehmet been 91% done with his task for the last 4 days? The funny thing about the stand-up meeting is that it requires an awful lot of trust to go well, but it's one of the first things that we tell teams to try to do. I mean, there's a reason why Mehmet didn't ask for help. He is afraid of us. Well, we haven't worked together that long. Why should he trust us? But what we expect him to do every morning is to stand there for 15 minutes and talk about how stupid he is. That seems kind of unfair, doesn't it? But if we can just focus our energy on what might be getting in our way, what are the risks that we face today that we've just found out about yesterday? And then let's figure out how to make sure that we're addressing those risks. This book is fantastic for that. So this is one of the Tom DeMarco, Tim Lister books. This is, for me, still the classic textbook on the subject of risk management in software. And I know the book is something like 15 years old by now. Risk management is project management for adults. And I would even say Agile software development is project management for adults. Here's another one. It has become the law since about 2010, 2011 that every team has to have a Kanban board. Right? Now, you can't call yourself Agile unless you have a Kanban board. Everyone is doing it. That's David Anderson's nice red purse, the Kanban board, which drives him nuts, by the way, because, of course, this is one of the least important parts of the Kanban method, but I'll let him talk about that later. It looks pretty good. I think everything's quite sensible. If you wait 3 or 4 more weeks, then you're going to see sticky notes piling up on the to-do side. And you're also going to see that some very important work ends up not on this board at all. There's somebody in the corner furiously doing something, and they're not working on an item in here because something came up and, oh my God, we have to do it now. What happened? Well, what's missing is having a way of dealing with the issues that pop up. Programmers are very good at doing what they said they would need to do. And they're very bad at knowing what they might need to do. They're very bad at that unexpected work, that unplanned work. Well, you can add a little something here called the inbox, and every time something comes up, we stick a sticky note in the inbox. And then we have a rule that says, every day during the stand-up meeting, the first thing we do is go to the inbox, and we see what's there, and we deal with those issues first. And sometimes the answer is, we hand it to somebody, and they do it in 2 minutes. And sometimes the answer is, this is a problem with that story, let's put it right there. But we make sure that we deal with those problems. And it's amazing to me, I've now been teaching variations of this to people and teams for the last 5 years. And about 50% of the people that I work with say that this is the single most useful thing I've taught them. And I've written an article, for those of you who have heard of Getting Things Done but not read the book yet, because it seems maybe it's a little bit too much like a religion, I understand. I've written an article called Getting Started with Getting Things Done. It's 4 pages, you can read it in 5 minutes, and you can get started right away. And then you can decide whether you want to read the whole book. Behavior-driven development has become more fashionable in the last 5 or 6 years. This is what most people associate with BDD. Cucumber tests. I don't know about you, but I don't know that I'm so eager to go back to COBOL. But if you work in Cucumber long enough, then your Cucumber tests will start to feel like COBOL. There's a reason we don't program in English, or Lithuanian, or Swedish, or any other natural language. None of our natural languages are context-free grammars. That's the first reason. That's the geek reason. The simple reason is it just doesn't work. It now becomes saying something that you could say in 55 characters in an entire screen. I mean, there are languages where you can write that program with literally 1 character and then the string hello world. We don't need all this. We also have the problem that even if we use behavior-driven development, if it's a programmer-led revolution, then what we end up with is stockpiling undeployed, unsold features, waiting for a customer to care about them. What's missing? One of the most controversial practices in extreme programming was the on-site customer. Thou shalt have a customer on-site at your disposal. Admittedly, programmers wrote this. I remember Mary Poppendick at a conference about 10 years ago saying, it's time for us to stop saying that the business needs to come to the programmers. Now we need to start saying that the programmers need to go to the business. That the programmers should take their laptops and go sit with business people and find out how they really work. And then build software that supports what they do. But either way, what's missing is that we're not involving the customer. And that's why we have problems like this. One killer technique for solving this problem is talking in examples. Notice it's talking in examples. This works great because whenever you and I are trying to discuss a concept, there's a picture in your head and there's a picture in my head, and these pictures are different. But when we start to talk about examples of what we mean, then those pictures become closer to each other. And most of the problems that we have in shipping good features come down to what's in the customer's head and what's in our head are still too much different. And we can use talking in examples as a way of bringing those pictures closer together. As Liz Keogh puts it, the most important thing is to have the conversation. Most people focus on automating the conversation. So when they start to do behavior-driven development, the first thing they do is they install Cucumber, then they install Jenkins, they get the build working, they start trying to write a test, and after they write the first 125 tests, everything is very slow, they get bored, and they stop. That's because they're not focusing on the most important part. Having the conversation with a business person between business and technical people is much more important even than writing those conversations down. Here's another one of our good friends, the user story. Boy, the user story gets a lot of heat. A lot of people hate user stories because they hate the Connextra format, the as a, I want to, so that format. So much so that there's a lot of people out there, I know none of them are in this room, but there's a lot of people out there who think that that's all a user story is. That a user story is stating your requirements in the form, as a blank, I want to blank, so that blank. No. That's just a way to start writing user stories to remind us what's important about them. Once again, go back and read the paper. You can see this card is from 2001. We've had this problem for a long time. We did not intend for user stories to become a new format for writing old specifications. And we certainly don't want to get into the trouble of, oh, because we do it this way, we end up in this problem where our customers are fighting among each other for who gets their story next. What's missing? One of the most important parts of stories is that they should be small and independent. The goal is that we should be able to build them in any sequence. That way, these guys don't have to fight as much. What's missing, I think, is focusing on scenarios. This is the BDD part that people just rush to Cucumber and they treat it like a test automation tool. Instead of talking with their business, talking in examples and asking, what does it really mean to use this feature? What does it really look like? Now, when you just ask somebody, what do you mean? They don't know what kinds of details to give you. If you ask someone to describe their house, they don't know whether you mean from an architectural point of view, from a what's it like to live in it point of view, or just it's a box, it's over there. When we talk in examples, as soon as I say, oh, so for example, blah, 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 now the business person can say, yes, that's what I meant, or no, that's not what I meant. Now the business person knows what kinds of details are useful for me, and we can have a much better conversation compared to me just saying, what is it that you'd like today? Right? Business people looking for features can't order off a menu. It's not that simple. We can use talking in examples as a way to help them understand what details do we need and what details do we not need. And when we make a guess about what they mean, it's easier for them to say, not quite, change this, and it'll be perfect. Not only that, but imagine that we could identify the key scenarios in each story that we have to build first, and then we could build the rest in any order. Imagine how great that would be. Story mapping is one move in this direction. Imagine we build all the red scenarios first, and then after we've built all the red scenarios, we can build all the rest in any sequence we want. Now, the business can change their mind as much as they want, and we don't care. We have a much better chance of building a product that's likely to sell early and give the business cash in their pocket. Early earned value. Just writing as a I want so that on story cards is not going to get us here. Here's another one of the controversial practices, our good friend pair programming. We all know pair programming is a better idea, except a lot of people when they try pair programming maybe end up with a variation of these. I have a rule that says that if you see someone make a mistake, you need to wait 15 seconds before you tell them about the mistake. Otherwise, you're doing what I call semicolon pairing, which is you missed a semicolon. Yeah, shut up. Give me 10 seconds and I'll put it there. The compiler will tell me if I'm missing a semicolon. It'll be fine. We also have the problem of tunnel vision. If we keep pairing with the same people forever and ever and ever, then we end up thinking like one person. Pair programming is not meant to be a marriage. At best, it's an open marriage. What's missing? What's missing is remembering that the goal of pair programming is to increase, one of the goals of pair programming is to increase the rate at which we learn, is to give information a chance to flow through the team like air. And so promiscuous pairing, pairing with different people frequently, is a key part, not only in sharing information about what we're supposed to do, but I learn a cool trick from him and I teach it to him. And he teaches it to her and she teaches it to him. And within 3 days, everybody knows the cool trick. We all save 5 minutes a day. Imagine we did that every week. Imagine if every week we all learned a trick that saved us 5 minutes a day. We would improve our productivity by 50% by the end of the year. Instead of, Vitas hoarding all his cool tricks and never teaching anybody. Because he's never going to do a lunch and learn, and even if he did, we're not going to pay attention. But if we can learn a trick from him at the moment we need it, we're going to remember it. There's another aspect of pair programming that I really think we forget.
So the mindset that I'm talking about here is something that I'm calling confident humility. And what it means is, it means knowing that it's totally okay that you suck. Knowing that you're not expected to be perfect, that in fact, the fact that it's okay for you to make mistakes, and it's okay for you to suck, means you can do whatever the hell you want. Right? You can walk around in the world and you can, you know, tell people your ideas. You can listen to criticism because you're so confident that it's totally okay for you to make mistakes or for you to not get it right, that there's no risk. That's what we have to teach our pairs. When I'm pairing with somebody and we're just like going back and forth and somebody says, you know, God, that's a stupid thing, you know, I don't want to do that. Or, okay, that's a stupid name. That's just something that I've heard in pairs. That's a stupid name. If you're in a pair where both of you have this confident humility, it's not an issue for somebody to say that.
I've never worked faster than when I've paired with somebody who also has confident humility. And it takes practice. It takes self-awareness. Here's another one of our favorite practices, the retrospective. Again, something that we often teach people as the first thing they should try. And immediately we notice there are a bunch of people who don't feel like they can speak up. There are a bunch of people who won't shut up. Either that they complain about everything or that they say everything is great. Neither one is helpful. What's missing? Trust. It's the same reason why Mehmet won't tell us why he's 91% done on the 4th straight day. As it turns out, trust is one of the really basic elements in any team. And because Agile software development relies on teams working together, trust is even more important for us. And The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is one of the good books that helps us understand that trust is a place to start. TDD is pretty straightforward. No code without a failing test. How much easier can it get? There's one rule. And yet a bunch of programmers end up feeling like now they're writing paperwork in order to write the code they want to write. Why do I have to write this test? I know what code I want to write, just let me do it. Or they end up with a rather false sense of security. They have a bunch of tests, but because they're not taking care of the design, things aren't getting better. They experience this problem, where the tests essentially make it difficult for them to change their code, even though it's supposed to make it easy for them to change their code. What's missing? I think the bottom line is that most programmers who learn about test-driven development drastically underestimate the importance of refactoring. And I mean this kind of refactoring. Cleaning the kitchen as you cook. Making little messes everywhere so that you never make a big mess. If you've ever cooked and not cleaned while you're cooking for 3 straight days, on the 4th day you order pizza. Because it takes 3 hours to clean the kitchen. That's when we put a refactoring card on our board and somebody says, why do we have a task for refactoring? Estimating is another one of my favorite topics. If you have followed some of the conversations on Twitter over the last several months, they seem to be calming down a bit. I tried to use the hashtag #mehestimates, which I pronounce as mestimates, just to illustrate that I don't think estimating is bad necessarily, but I think we do too much of it just because the book told us to. And sure as hell, I can't tell the difference between a 20 story and a 40 story. I think that's just insane. Estimating with this deck is pretty much the same as doing this. We end up rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic, by the way, in case you can get the reference. Or it's a lot like this. You end up with managers who want the team to go faster. So they put pressure on people to lower their estimates. To those managers, I like to go to the local video game shop and get the hardware for the driving game and give them just the gas pedal part, and I put it under their desk. And when they feel like they want to pressure the programmers to have better estimates, they just pump the pedal a few times. Go faster. It has the same effect. What's missing? Once again, if we focus on figuring out the kernel of features, the part that we have to build first, then it becomes possible to ship features sooner and we care less about estimating. I like this scale. Give me a minute. I'd add give me a minute. So give me a minute, that's a 1. Way too big, no idea. I would actually put infinity, and question mark. And those are the only 4 estimates. That's it. Here's another one of my personal favorites, continuous integration. I don't care if you've got Jenkins running on day 1, but you're not going to be able to integrate everything at once all the time. What's missing? Continuous integration is not about having Jenkins running on a server in San Francisco. Continuous integration is the idea that we don't go off on our own, work for 3 weeks, and then try to jam it back into the system. That we do a little bit of work, integrate it, a little bit of work, integrate it. And I don't care how you do that, just as long as you have the idea that you do a little bit of work, integrate it. And when integration is difficult, you do it more often. Continuous integration, as James Shore says, is an attitude, not a tool. We have this problem. What's missing is the notion that a customer actually accepts our stories. This goes back to the BDD problem a little bit. That we're building up an inventory of stories that a customer is not using yet. Then, of course, there's our good friends, the Scrum Masters. It ends up being a lot like this. If you've never seen the film Kitchen Stories, I highly recommend it, especially if you're either Norwegian or Swedish. What is it that your Scrum Master would say that they do? I've worked with Scrum Masters who are in the difficult position of being told to be Scrum Masters without being given a clear vision. So they just wander the countryside. They are the embodiment of the idea, I am a solution in search of a problem. And it's really bad for them. What's in the way, I think, is ego. And I'm going to make this one statement. This was the most tweeted thing I said in this keynote 2 weeks ago. And a lot of people are annoyed at me, so I'm going to say it again. I think that the Scrum Master concept has become an unexpected and unintended implementation of the Stanford prison experiment. Where there are Scrum Masters, there will probably be Scrum slaves. And I'm not blaming the Scrum Masters for that. If you watch the film Das Experiment, you learn that no matter how nice the people are, once you give them uniforms and batons, they'll look for somebody to beat. What do you think practitioners of Agile software development miss when they try to follow our advice? Or if you are a practitioner trying to learn, what advice do you think we're giving that you're not getting? I like to focus on a bunch of ideas when I practice. One of them is ensuring that we actually do refactor, that we just figure out what the problem is and solve it, and don't try to follow the rules. But use the rules as tools in a toolbox to tell us how to solve problems. I also teach something that I used to call product sashimi that I now call value-driven product development, because nobody understood what product sashimi meant. I don't blame them. That this is a way of approaching behavior-driven development that allows us to get early earned value. That's not just about learning how to get Cucumber running and how to write Cucumber tests. The 3 steps to a useful minimal feature is an example of one of the techniques that I teach. This is, for me, the killer technique that allows us to get to the point where we can build the core of the system first and then the rest in any order. I teach programmers as well a bunch of ways of how to approach software design. And I teach them rules that they can follow that help them behave well 85% of the time, but I remind them you still have to keep the brain on. You can't just follow the rules and hope for the best. You start to follow the rules, you pay attention to what's happening, and you ask questions. The rules are telling me to do something strange. Should I really do it, or are the rules wrong here? And then find one of us and have a conversation with us. And we'll tell you, yes, if you follow the rules, they're trying to teach you something, stick with it. Or no, this is one case where the rules are probably not going to help, do something else. Here are a couple of not Agile books that I think are particularly helpful to everyone in this room. Here's a model from another one. This is from the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I mentioned this earlier. That trust is probably the single biggest bottleneck to your teams working well. And until you start figuring out how to gain more trust and how to create more trust within the team, not much else will change. Certainly having stand-up meetings won't do it. I have to plug a little bit of my own work. So for the programmers in the room, if you haven't seen Integrated Tests Are a Scam or read it, please find the 2013 version that was recorded in Jurmala. Not the 2009 version where I was 60 kilograms heavier. I'd like that to go off the internet if possible. Mob programming is another trend that's become more and more interesting. I would suggest that you look into that. And although unfortunately we're not going to have a legacy code retreat here tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon, we do have Global Day of Code Retreat coming up. This is a place where programmers can practice together in an environment where they can relax and have fun and learn and not feel the pressure of everyday work. So these are just a handful of things that I'm doing, promoting and teaching, to help convey the vision better, to help deal with the parts that are missing, the things that people don't quite see when they just read the rules. So I ask you, will you join me in trying to do the same thing? Pick one practice that you think people aren't getting right, where they're not getting the value that they expect, and try to find out for them what's missing and help them get that. Thanks very much for your time and attention, and especially for letting me go 5 minutes over. I don't want to be in the way of coffee, but I couldn't help it. I needed that 2 days ago. Where were you 2 days ago? I needed that.
Maybe a bit too late.
That's fine. I love it. That's fantastic. The one from XP 2008 is broken, so now I have to